Welcome to the Trick Play Podcast. The full podcast is available on both YouTube and anywhere you get your podcasts.
Hello and welcome back to the Trick Play Podcast. I'm Simon Szyszkowski here with Caleb Peterson, and shortly we'll be breaking down all the sports-related news, rumors, and drama that you will want to hear about. And this week we talked about the NHL draft, which happened just I believe a few days before this dropped. And we talk about, I believe, the first 12 picks, just breaking them down, talking about all the players as prospects and the team fits. We got into all of that. Then we talked about the NHL Finals a little bit late, but just with the timing of all that, we couldn't talk about it before that. And we had a good conversation about it. Then we went into the NBA and talked about the Lakers selecting Bronny James, the son of LeBron, at the 55th pick, and all of the both outrage and arguments online regarding that. Make sure to check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, and anywhere else you get your podcast. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube as well, as we have new content coming out every single week on each and every one of those platforms. And make sure to, I'm going to mention this as well, especially an extra note on subscribing to the YouTube, is we are at, I believe, as of recording this, 96 subscribers. Yeah, we are 4 away from triple digits. Whoa. So if you're an audio listener, go subscribe to the YouTube right now, or Bronny James will get traded to your basketball team.
Now, last night, as of recording, the NHL draft happened in Las Vegas, in the Sphere, and I think it's still going on right now, but forgive us if we don't have the best knowledge of the 6th and 7th round picks. We're just going to talk about the top 10 or 15 so guys, because gonna be honest, I think even my knowledge is kind of struggling to go that far. So we'll get through the top 10 or 15.
Once you get to like round 3 for me, it's probably like a 25% chance I know the guy. After that, we're done. That's it. So
I think anything past the first round, I'm like, you could tell me that was a randomly generated AI name. And I wouldn't have told you anything.
That was actually a name generated by NHL, EA NHL.
Yeah. When it just gets like the stock face render, you know.
Yeah. But yeah, it was a pretty cool draft.
We've got Do you want to start? Because I know, Simon, I didn't get the chance to watch it, but you got to watch it in the Sphere in Las Vegas. What did you think of the environment there?
Well, I can't say that I was in the Sphere, but it was pretty cool.
Well, you felt like you were in the Sphere. You felt like you were in the Sphere.
It's the first event I've seen in the Sphere so far. I think the UFC is going there at some point in the next few months. So that's going to be... I'm more excited for that now after watching this, just because of like... I didn't realize there was a massive screen on the inside of the Sphere. I'm sure you saw photos of that. That was pretty cool. I think the way they were using it was very, very neat. It kind of just looked like a huge movie theater, a little bit, is kind of what I would describe what it looked like. But it was still pretty neat. Honestly, it made for a pretty cool watching experience. And most of the coverage of this draft was really good as well. Mainly because it is a insanely stacked draft. I think I've kind of had the opinion for the last little bit that pretty much anybody in the top 10, if not like probably 12, is going to be a star. Like with exception to, I'm sure there's going to be a few busts because there always are. But in the top 12, there are just so many good players this year. So I think we can get right into it because I think we're probably going to go top 15. Once we get to 15, my knowledge might fall off and what I can explain about the players might start to go away. But we'll start at number 1 in what was the least shocking pick of the draft, I think. San Jose took Macklin Celebrini, the center from Boston University. Pretty much the way that he has been described this entire draft process is he is the best well-round player in the draft by far. And it's not necessarily one thing that sticks out about him that makes you want to take him at number 1. It's everything. It's the full package. The comparison that a lot of people have made for him was Sidney Crosby, which obviously is very high praise. But it is fairly well-deserved for him as a prospect. If he lives up to that sort of hype at the NHL level, he is probably the next Crosby in a lot of ways. So I don't know if we want to rank these picks or something like that. Like
Oh God, I don't know
probably
if I'll be able to do that.
probably not. This is probably the least surprising one. I could have told you this like 2 years ago that this was going to be the number one pick. I think
Yeah.
anybody could have, right? It was just obvious. Like it's not almost not even interesting. Like I bet Macklin's known that he was going to San Jose since like the
The draft
since San
lottery.
Jose, yeah, the draft lottery, since San Jose discovered they had the pick. So, if anything, it's
Yeah.
not that interesting. If we were to give rankings, A plus. Good job, San Jose. You took the guy who's been the number one guy for the last 2 years. Good job, you did it.
Yeah.
It starts to get a bit
Yeah.
more interesting. Or no, I'll let you go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, I think the Crosby comparison is really interesting because if he is the best kind of all-around player, you look at what Crosby's done for the Penguins, and you don't really, there's nothing really specific that stands out. Like you were kind of talking about before the podcast, where it's like you look at McDavid and it's his skating ability, or you look at someone like Ovechkin with his shot, where Crosby doesn't necessarily have one defining thing. It's just how he plays the game as a whole that sets him apart. And for the Sharks to get a player like that in the draft, I think it's something they have needed for a while because after the kind of like Joe Thornton, Patrick Marleau years, they've kind of been, I think they treaded water for a little bit there, but they've been kind of the laughing stock of the league for a couple of years. So to get a kind of cornerstone player that will revitalize your team is huge for them and huge in bringing back, because I mean, it's not like San Jose is the most traditional hockey market, bringing back some interest to that team and just kind of like bringing in something. And then they've got some players coming down the pipeline in past drafts. If they do have Celebrini, because I don't know whether he's going to play for them this year or if he's going to go back to college or if
He hasn't announced
because
his
that's
decision
never
yet.
he hasn't announced his decision
No.
yet.
They
So
they asked him
I
at the
think
draft, and he
that
said that he would announce it at some point in the next little while.
okay. So who knows? I'm sure he'd be ready, based
Yeah.
on everything that we've been hearing about him. But never a bad thing to go back and develop a little bit more. But it'll be definitely interesting the next few years for the Sharks to just see how their team kind of pans out and if some of their high draft picks across the last few years pan out, and Celebrini obviously being the most important one, even if it was obvious.
Yeah. Well, and I think the Sharks absolutely needed a player like this. I think you made a really good point with that. They actually had Joe Thornton come out to draft him. I'm sure you and everybody else saw
Yeah,
that
I
clip.
saw
As
that.
that pretty much went instantly viral because it's the passing of the torch, right? That's exactly what it is. And I think in a lot of ways, take away the height from a guy like Joe Thornton, and the comparisons could be there as well. As when I think of Joe Thornton, I think of a very well-rounded center. But anyway, we can move on. I think people you can there is enough videos on the internet all spewing over how good of a prospect Celebrini is, but I think we can start to get into the meat and potatoes of this entire thing, which is, in my opinion, 2 through 10. Because the main thing that you would have heard going into this draft is anyone could go anywhere. Like that, there are so many good players through the top 10. Number one was for sure. We knew that Celebrini was going number one no matter what. After that is when it gets a bit interesting. Number two was the Chicago Blackhawks, and the conversation going into the pick was mainly around who they were going to get to try and pair up with Bedard. And were they going to go forward? Were they going to try and get a defenseman to add on to their already very young defensive core? They have a few defensemen in the last few years that they took in the first round. Korchinski and another guy that I cannot remember the name of off the top of my head. But who they decided to go with was, I'm going to butcher this hard. Artyom Levshinov. I think Levshinov is the last name. I'm going to stick to the last name. I don't know how to pronounce that first name. I'm sorry, Mr. Levshinov. But he was widely regarded as the best defender in the entire draft class. And mainly, and when I say that, I mean most well-rounded defensemen. I think the two most well-rounded players went in the top two, is probably the way that I describe it. He's not necessarily, he's definitely not the best offensive, but as a two-way defenseman, he's the best that you were going to get. You're getting the best of both worlds with this guy. And in a lot of ways, that probably makes him the most sure thing defenseman in the draft as well, because he has all of those skills. He can do a little bit of everything. Even if the offense doesn't translate at the NHL level, there's a good chance something else will. So I think it's a very good pick for Chicago. It adds some very strong, oh, excuse me, a very strong defensive player to their team, because a lot of the young defensemen they have, I would describe more as offensive defensemen. I don't know if I'd use that term with Levshinov. He's very, very balanced. So in general, as a pick, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I mean, looking more at Chicago's roster, I think the only question I would maybe ask you, Simon, is in terms of positional value, positional fit. Because obviously, I think Chicago is kind of in a place where anywhere you go, they would need help, but still, obviously, Bedard and some of the other players they brought along just did not make Bedard's rookie season a complete shit show, for lack of a better
Yeah.
word. Like, you've got your Taylor Halls, you've got your Nick Folinos, you got some of the veterans in there that kind of make this roster look a little bit better. But aside from Bedard and some other prospects that are or younger guys that have kind of been coming up in the ranks, the forward depth is looking really rough here too. Do you think it was the right play to go with the defenseman here, or would you have looked for maybe the second best forward after Celebrini?
When I was watching the draft, I did think they were going to go forward. I mainly
Mm.
just because that's what made the most sense to me. I think a lot, while the defensemen in this draft are very good as well, I think a lot of the really true talent is on the offensive side. Like, I mean, I start to think of like the guys who could have been taken at 4 or 5, like Ivan Demidov, Caden Lindstrom. Either of them would have been really, really good guys to pair alongside like Bedard in that sort of situation. So in that sense, I do agree with you. I think being at number 2 kind of shoehorned them into taking Levshinov in a weird way, if that makes sense, because he was the best available pick. Because he's just, in a lot of ways, he is the most sure thing other than Celebrini, I guess is the way I'd put it. So it's the safest pick. So it's not that
And I
I'm
mean,
mad about it. They're not necessarily missing out, but yeah, I see where you're coming from. They need a lot of help on offense
yeah,
as well.
I think just in general, it's going to be like another, even though they have Bedard and now Levshinov, like I think it's going to be another like 2 to 3, maybe even 4 years before we start seeing this team start contending again, or like even making it into the playoffs. Like this
Playoffs,
roster
I'd
is a
say
long
3.
ways away.
Yeah, it's
Playoffs,
at least
yeah,
3.
I'd even potentially go to 4 years on playoffs because I just think
Mm.
I do think they really stripped their roster pretty much bare. Um,
Yeah,
if
that's
you
true.
if it's not a great lineup. There's a reason they have the number 2 pick, and there's a reason the Sharks are the only ones above them. They are the only team possibly that could be worse, and their roster is even more
Yeah,
bare just because they don't have Bedard until last night. Is
yeah,
someone in that same realm. The one thing I would say before we move on to number 3, talking about it being a sure thing, I think that probably is good draft strategy in the NHL. Because I think, especially
yeah.
comparing it to the NFL draft, um, where prospects who come into the NFL are, like 21, 22 years old, 23 years old, where they've been through all 4 years of college and have played um, in front of some of the biggest crowds in America, crowds that often kind of rival the NFL. They've already handled that pressure. They're already physically developed. They've already had 4 years of fantastic coaching, most often by guys who have experience in the NFL or could go to the NFL if they wanted to, like formerly your Nick Sabans, like whatever you can find, like your Kalen DeBoers, whatever you may say. But coming into the NHL, I think it's a lot more about potential, especially um, less so in the first few picks, but even then, these guys are lots of '06. So these guys are how old now? How old are we? What are we, like 20?
These guys are all 18.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Um, these are guys who are all 18 or something, which is like they're basically still kids, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so I think drafting based on what you think is going to be the surest thing is a even more sound strategy in a league like the NHL, where a lot of the time you are just drafting based on potential and then your own trust in your own prospect development system and prospect development team.
Yeah. And I think if we want to move on to number 3, which is probably the funniest thing that happened in the entire draft from what I was able to watch, and it kind of set the whole world ablaze for a little bit, trying to figure out exactly what he said, what he mouthed to his mother after hearing his name get picked. What? But the Anaheim Ducks drafted Beckett Seneke, in which his reaction and all of our reactions at home was probably very similar. I thought he said "holy fuck." That is what I read. Like which I thought was hilarious. A lot of people online seem to think he said "oh fuck," which is a very different meaning.
Yeah.
My dad, who was sitting next to me, his reaction, I think he thought he said "oh fuck" as well, because he just looked at me and said, "Who the hell wouldn't want to play in Anaheim? You get to wear shorts, walk into the
Yeah.
rink, like, just fair. It's fair." But Anaheim necessarily isn't the best team to be on position wise, I guess. They're a weird team in the. They're going to be a weird team in the next few years, is the way that I describe Anaheim. They don't have a lot going their way for the most part, but nonetheless, while it might have been a bit of a shocker, I don't think anybody really thought he'd go this high. I don't actually remember where he was predicted. All I know is it wasn't 3. I think.
Yeah, it was top 10, but not 3.
Yeah, I think if you had asked me before the draft, I would have expected Lindstrom, Demidov, and probably Ginla as well to go above him. If I, but this is the world we live in now, obviously, and not to say that he isn't deserving. For the most part, he is a very skilled player, and he showed that in the OHL this year. I mean, very good two-way player, I think, is the main thing that I've read in the last little bit doing research on him. He's very, very strong on both sides of the ice, which I think probably was what elevated him, if I were to guess, because there's a lot of very strong offensive players. Out of all of those guys, he's probably the best on the other side as well. So there's that, I guess. But yeah, nonetheless, it felt like a very weird pick, honestly.
Yeah.
Watching it,
I think
my original reaction was just why. There are so many. They have a lot of center depth. Would be the one reason I could probably pin on why they didn't want to take any of the other guys. But at least to me, it felt very odd.
And I mean, and that makes sense. I mean, you look at because I think a couple things out of what you said. I think in terms of the center depth, talking about like Anaheim being a kind of in a weird position. Yeah, I agree, because I don't think their rebuild has worked out necessarily in all of the ways they've wanted. But I would still rather play for a team like Anaheim than a team like Chicago or San Jose, just because I think they are a little bit further along in terms of some of the young talent they have. When I look at the list of players that they have, I have a lot more confidence in some of the Ducks prospects right now, just as a whole, not necessarily saying that any of these guys are better than Bedard or Celebrating, because obviously they're not. But just as a whole, I feel like they have a lot more depth in their prospect lineup. Where you look at a guy like Cutter Gauthier, you look at a guy like Leo Carlson. I know there's been trade rumors around him, but you still have to talk about Zegras. I just think there's a lot more promise as of right now in what I'm seeing on this roster. So I think going to a place like Anaheim, I think is still really good for any of these prospects. And I think for Beckett Seneke, I think the oh fuck was probably more so just about being picked that early. I don't think it was because of Anaheim in particular, whether location or roster wise. I think he just probably had the same reaction as all of us to say, oh, I didn't think I was getting my name called until number 7 or number 8, and now I'm here.
Yeah.
And the cameras are all on me. I think that's probably more of the roster than anything. So I think those were the couple thoughts I had about this pick.
No, and I do agree with you. I think that is what happened, but it was very funny watching the reaction to that online. Like, I think I might try and find it. I might try and find it because it was it's very accurate, but I did see a photo. It's just like a drunk guy sitting on his couch holding a Corona, going. That is basically what
Yeah.
Beckett Sedeki's reaction was to the pick, which I mean, it was just absolutely hilarious. We can move on though. I don't know enough about him, honestly, for the most part, to give like a real prediction. It just felt weird. That is my
Yeah.
professional opinion. Professional draft analysts here. Number 4,
Yeah.
Caden Lindstrom. This is a guy I have actually heard a lot about. There was a lot of hype around him going into this year with I believe it's the Tiger Cats, right? Medicine Hat? Yeah. I
Yep.
I out of all of the players in the top 3, it feels like he was probably the one I actually heard the most about, which is odd. Because I know,
Mm.
like Celebrini, it felt like he was such a sure thing that we stopped hearing about him in a weird way. And I think a lot of the hype, at least for me, started to fall on Lindstrom. I think he ended up starting because he kind of has it all offensively. I don't know as much about his defensive game, but from what I have seen from him, he's 6'3". He's got a good amount of speed. He's can shoot. Like on the offensive side of things, he's got it all, right? Like if you're looking for a guy who can be that power forward and cause a little bit of damage, you got it. If you're looking for a scorer, you got it. If you want a guy who can pass, you got it. For all of those things, for that offensive first line center, like on the potential side at the very least, Lindstrom's your guy for the most part. Like he just is so strong on that side of the puck, and he was really good for Medicine Hat this year in the games he got to play. The one downside was that he did get hurt, which is why he didn't necessarily get a full season to show off. But I think Columbus got a really good player here. Honestly, I from everything that I've heard, I know a lot of the people in Medicine Hat are very very high on him, and yeah, I think for me he was the guy that I sort of expected Anaheim to take, and which was part
Yeah.
of the reason I was surprised. Seeing Lindstrom fall to 4 was very odd, at least to me, but nonetheless, very very good pick I think from Columbus. The only reason it might become questioned or interesting is because of who went at 5. There was a lot of hype around who went at
Mm.
5, but we can talk about that when we get there.
Yeah. And I think with Lindstrom, I think this. So we're just looking at this ESPN article. Their just live draft tracker makes a good point in terms of how it adds to their center depth, and I think they're kind of building from center out, because the picks in the last few drafts have all been center. You look at Fantilli last year, you look at Sillinger, and now you look at Lindstrom. And I think that's just a really smart way to build your hockey team. I think Columbus has been in a bit of a difficult spot the last couple of years, especially in terms of who they've had, um, and just in terms of making decisions about a lot of the personnel on their staff. You look at the whole Mike Babcock thing. I believe they just fired their other coach as well, who took over for Babcock.
Yes, I think so.
His name is passing me.
Yeah, I don't remember
But
that either.
now they brought in Don Waddell from the Hurricanes. Kekalainen is gone after like I don't know, like 20 years with the team or whatever it was, less than that, but he's been there forever. Um, and so it does seem like a little bit of a fresh start. It'll be interesting to see who they hire to be their new coach. But I do think this team has a really good future after kind of being a team that was just in a weird limbo zone with getting Gaudreau and Line A. It's like, do they want to
Yeah.
compete now? Do they not? And then it all kind of blew up in their face. Now I think you're kind of starting to see some of their prospects start to pan out and are just adding to it with another guy who you just kind of hit right on the money at number 4 and say, yeah, in a couple of years, this guy is going to be one of the cornerstone pieces of our team.
Yep. And I don't disagree with any of that. I think his potential is through the roof. I'm gonna say that about a lot of people in the first few picks, but especially with Lindstrom. He is just so insanely talented. Columbus got their guy here. I think, like out of like
Yeah.
in who is probably going to be a very strong future scorer. I think he's going to be. I think his game is going to translate very well to the NHL, just because of the size, the everything. He's got it all. But we can move on.
Yeah.
Number 5, Ivan Demidov. This one's a bit interesting. I think, from what I heard, he still has another year in the KHL, which might have added to him dropping a little bit. I know a lot of people thought that he was going to go higher, especially in the months before. I think at one point he was ranked as high as 2. So seeing him drop to 5 was a little shocking, I think. And even seeing him behind Lindstrom, I imagine for some people was pretty surprising. And nonetheless, I think it's not. I don't know how to necessarily explain it. I think, for the most part, I think Montreal got a really good player here. Like, you could even see the reaction from the fans in the arena. Like, most of them were very happy to see them take Demidov. And as long as the reason for him falling isn't a big one, and it's just the fact that he's stuck in the KHL for another year, they've got their star. Like, this guy's going to be a stud in the NHL. He's got all of the talent of a great offensive player, and I mean, what else could you really want at number 5? He's a lot better than your average 5th pick, is what I would say about him. And I think, yeah, I don't even know what else to really add to that. He's just, he averaged 2 points per game in the KHL, which I think the only player who's ever gotten similar to that, I believe, was Kucherov, who got like 1.5. If that adds to the hype of him for you. Like, he's going to be good.
Yeah. And especially dominating in a league like the KHL, which I think, and it's not like any of the leagues in the CHL or anything.
Oh,
in
I
the
might have fucked up. It might not be KHL. It might be the Russian juniors. That might be
I just confirm. I mean, I'm looking him up on Elite Prospects right now. It does say he is in the KHL.
Oh, okay.
Plays for
Petersburg,
SKA St. Petersburg, which I believe is straight up in the KHL.
That is in the KHL, I believe. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's KHL, but
yeah. So that is obviously putting up those kind of numbers in the KHL as an 18-year-old is pretty crazy, especially considering the difference between that and some of the other junior leagues. You're not just playing against other 18-year-olds, other like 17, 16-year-olds. You will be playing against other professionals. And there is still a lot of good players in the KHL. Obviously, nowhere up to NHL level, but I think it's a better indication of the kind of different body types, different skill sets you're going to go against, often than some of the talent in the CHL. Because I remember that being one of the concerns we had about Bedard, one of the like 2 concerns that we may have had with Bedard going into, was just in terms of how the physicality could be
what was the second
affected
one?
by. I don't even know. I think we only had really the one.
Yeah, that was a very
we should have had about 0.
Yeah, and that was
we should have had about 0.
We had one because I felt the need to have one. It was a very nitpicky one.
Yeah.
And that isn't the case with pretty much anyone in this draft. Like,
no.
I have less of an issue with Celebrini. Like, mainly, I don't even have a nitpick with Celebrini, mainly because he just, compared to Bedard, he's a lot more balanced of a prospect. Like, you'll never hear
higher floor, lower ceiling, almost.
I don't even know if I describe it as that. It's just like it's the same thing I said before. When you have it all, something has to translate. Even if the defense doesn't translate, the offense might. If the offense doesn't, the defense might. Like, there's something there with Celebrini. Like, no matter what kind of player, there's no way he falls out of the league. Like, he has something.
Yeah.
He has something that no one else has, which is everything, right? When you're that well-rounded, just something has to work. And I think Bedard didn't necessarily have that. He was just an incredibly elite offensive player, which is why he was so insanely hyped, for good reason. But it was also a big reason that I was worried about the size. Because when you're that skilled offensively and you rely that heavily on that side of your game, but you're also very small for an NHL center, it can cause issues. It didn't necessarily cause that many issues for him, which wasn't very surprising, but it was the one nitpick I had.
Yeah. And I think just to draw back to Demidov, again, obviously, that with Bedard was a nitpick. It's not a nitpick you can have for Demidov just because of the type of players he was playing up against. I think putting the KHL as the reason why he might have fallen is really interesting. You saw that with Mishkov last year, right, where he was projected to be potentially in the top 5 if there wasn't the whole issue with, is he going to come out of Russia? He has another couple of years. When is he actually going to get to play for you? And it turns out that he's actually heading over this season. So it only ended up being a year, which for a lot of the prospects do take a year anyways. So I think it was smart
Yeah.
for the Canadians to not let him fall and trust that that process is going to play itself out and that he will eventually um, come to Montreal and play there for hopefully a very long time.
Yep. Yep, exactly. I think it was a very good pick. It was very smart on their end, especially considering most of I think with Michkov it was a little different because like you said, I don't think we really knew how long he'd be over there. Demidov
No.
has 1 year left on his contract in the KHL. I think we know that for sure.
Yeah.
So I think
Because Mishkov had to end his contract early to come over.
yeah, I think
Like I
so.
think he
Yeah.
terminated his contract early. Yeah.
Yeah. I think if we want to move on here, this is another pick that ended up being really interesting and had me swearing audibly in my living room. Number 6, Utah took Tijiginla, and very good pick. Fuck, 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 fuck is how I would describe this pick. Um, he it's a Ginla Jr. is almost what I describe watching him play. When you watch as a Flames fan for my entire life, watching him play as a prospect, you could tell where he learned how to play. Like he has that
Yeah.
same aggressiveness, he has that physicality, he has the shot. Like the way he plays is very similar. He's just a center and a little bit smaller is the main differences, right? In a lot of ways, like if you want to talk about ceiling, we know what the ceiling is. We saw the ceiling 20 years ago in Calgary. And I think that's why he was such an exciting prospect for everybody, especially in Calgary, and why he rose so much in the, like, I want to say 3 months before the draft. It's just, he's so explosive. I don't even know how to put it into words necessarily. Just watch his highlights. Like, you can see why he was able to climb into the top 10 the way he was. And it hurts so bad that the Flames weren't quite able to pick him because I really wanted the Flames to pick him. But Utah got one hell of a player, without a shadow of a doubt. That is definitely for sure. And I think it's going to be very, very cool to see him play at the NHL level, no matter what team he's on, as long as it wasn't Edmonton.
Well, it's a good thing that based on how they did this year, that would have never been a possibility.
Exactly.
It was really interesting to see his rise up the draft boards because I think he's been on Calgary's radar for just about like the entire year, if not more.
Since he's been born.
Yeah, pretty much just because of the history there, obviously. But I think it went from the conversation being earlier in the year, like, oh, is it too much of a reach to draft him with our first round pick, to, oh no, we're not even going to get him with our first round pick. And obviously that's what ended up happening. We talked about, or before the podcast, Conroy did try to move up to take Iginla, but potentially there was I think all the information that we got without speculating was just that it was a starting player on their roster, I believe, was the phrase. It would have been the ninth pick plus a starting player on their roster, which whoever that player was, the Flames didn't want to give up, and so
my guess,
Utah.
And I said to you again, speculation. I don't know anything. I'm a dumb poo-poo boy, but my guess was Rasmus Anderson because of how the Flames have been circulating him around. I'm guessing Conroy just didn't want to give up Anderson and the 9th, which is fair. That is a ridiculous amount to move up 3 picks.
Yeah.
So, and we'll talk about who the Flames ended up getting, and it worked out somewhat well for them anyway. So we can
yeah.
Oh, excuse me. We can move on. The Ottawa Senators took this is another one that I don't necessarily know that well, but Carter Yakimchuk. He played for the Hitmen in the WHL, actually. He played in Calgary. But there was a lot of people who were very, I want to say, worried about him going into this draft because he was the kind of player who could very easily rise, and I don't think a lot of fans wanted him to, oddly. I think he, out of all the people that I've heard of, he is the guy who, if you want to call it bust watch, I guess, he is the guy that I think a lot of fans have already kind of put in that spot. which
Mm.
is very odd. I think a lot of what we saw at the CHL level is kind of making, especially me, think that that's not necessarily fair. He had a very good season, 66 games played, 71 points, 30 goals, only second, I believe, to who the Flames took at number 9. But yeah, he's a very, very strong offensive defenseman, has the defense as well, but that's not necessarily where he shines. He's got the size as well. I think almost 6'3". On here it says 6'2", but I was hearing 6'3" in other places. He's got it all in a lot of ways. He's a tall offensive defenseman. What else could you want, right? So in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, Ottawa got a guy who's got a very high ceiling, but a lot of people are worried that he won't reach it. I guess would be the why he is where he is. I think a lot of ESPN had him ranked at 14th to add some more
Yeah.
context as well. So he obviously did rise quite a bit, but yeah, in a draft that has a lot of very strong forwards and defensemen, he is a fairly deserving second one to come off the board, for the most part.
Yep. And I think, just again, I think at the lower we get down on the board, I think my knowledge starts to trail off a little bit. But I think that the conversation, I think, has to go between him and Perrick, who the Flames picked, just to say if you're looking for a more offensively centered, offensive gifted defenseman, um, going Perrick almost feels like a smarter move, just because it seems like everything he can, like everything Yakimchuk can do, um, Perrick almost one ups. Even just looking at something as basic as the
At
stats.
least, at least
Um,
offensively.
at least offensively, that's what I mean in terms of
Yeah,
having that kind of skill set, because I think they're both very similar prototypes when you're looking at them, because both of them are more offensive defensemen. Um,
yeah,
and you look at Parrott getting 96 points in 66 games versus 71, so almost 20 more points. I know points aren't necessarily everything, but I think that's where
yeah.
you can look at that and say, like, is that maybe the right choice? Is it maybe not?
Yeah, I from what I've watched of both of them, because these are two guys who I have watched some tape on a little bit, just because I was curious about the defensemen going into the draft were where my knowledge was lower, so I decided to kind of figure it out a little bit more. Watching both of them play, um, a big reason why I think that Yakimchuk is a lot less of a sure thing is mainly because I don't necessarily believe in his speed at the second level. Like, he's not
Mhm.
that fast. Like, for an offensive defenseman, at least. Like, he doesn't
Mhm.
have that, like, next level speed. It worked at the CHL because he's 6'2" and 200 pounds. He was able to just, like, put his body in between the puck and skate around people like that. That's not going to work at the NHL level, or at least not to the same effectiveness. He does have all the other things, but I think that's the main reason I worry about him compared to Paraki, per, Perica, Perica, Perica. That's a name I need to work on. We had this conversation before the before the episode, but like on the other side, Perica I think is just he's a lot smaller, but he has that speed that I was just talking about. That does translate to the NHL level. When you're able to skate that fast, you'll get a lot of those chances still at that NHL level. Like, sure, the
Yeah.
defensemen are a lot bigger, and that's something you have to learn to deal with. But I mean, the passing's there. If it translates well, I think Perica is definitely the higher ceiling player. Yakimchuk has a lot of things he has to figure out before he can get there, but Ottawa clearly wasn't as worried about it as I am. So
Yeah.
yeah, number 8, if we want to move on because we're going at a snail's pace, is the Seattle Kraken, Berkeley Cadden, and this was the other one that had me going fuck, 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 because I also really wanted the Flames to potentially get a chance at this guy because he is really good. Catton is going to be a star. I did say before he went to the Kraken, I sort of predicted it in my own head, going like, he feels like a Kraken player. Like, there's something about Catton.
Mm.
He feels like he should play in Seattle, and that's why he's going there. The one nitpick about him was the fact that he is very undersized. He is the undersized player in this draft. He's 5'10". ESPN has him at
Mm.
170. I've seen him weigh in at a lot lower than that. Like 160 is where like usually I see him at. And it shows in the way he plays. A lot of comparison has been made to Goudreau in a lot of ways, like
Mm.
in his style and his ability to score, which is a good thing. But at the same time, you need that's not something that comes easy or translates easy to the NHL level. Like it's something that he'd probably have to develop. So he's not necessarily a guy who might be NHL next year, I guess, is kind of what I was thinking. I don't know if he'll be an instant NHL stud, but he in the future, I think he's absolutely got the chance to be really, really good. And his future as a center might be questionable more than anything. I think. I, funnily enough, we just talked about like the Bedard thing, like how I
Yeah, I was
came out
gonna
and say
bring
the
that up.
Bedard, yeah, the Bedard thing. I would apply that same comment to Catton with a lot more emphasis on it than I had with Bedard, because
Yeah.
I think between the two, Bedard Bedard at least played like he was bigger than he is, and he is bigger than Catton. Catton plays like Goudreau in the sense that he plays like he's smaller, and I don't know how that will work in the face-off circle. I guess I think
And
he
I mean,
works a lot better at winger at the NHL level.
and that's probably one of those things where you have to see that move once he starts to go pro. Whereas it works in the juniors, it works in Spokane, but it doesn't necessarily work at the NHL level when you're playing against guys that are 10 years older than you and about seems like 10 times bigger than you.
Yeah,
Because I mean, if you're playing like Gaudreau, you've got to have a lot more space. You're not going to necessarily be, like you said, in the face-off circle or winning any of those puck battles or anything. It'll be about trying to create space and trying to move, trying to use quickness to your advantage rather than size. I think it's a super interesting pick for Seattle. I think they're going to be, as they have been, an exciting team to watch in the next few years. Um, and they just continue to compile young talent like a lot of these teams have of them.
yep. And I think if we want to move on here, move on to number 9, which is the Calgary Flames, and we already talked about him a little bit when we talked about Yakimchuk. But Zane Pareka is who the Flames decided to go with at number 9. And when he was drafted, my reaction was a little bit. I don't know. I wasn't huge on it, I guess. I didn't want the Flames to go defenseman. Was kind of where or what I came into the draft thinking. But after the way that everything fell in the picks leading up to it, with Catton coming off the board, Jaginla coming off the boards, it made a lot of sense to go with Pareka here. He was definitely the best available, is without a doubt. He was the best available. I think the offensive talent that he has is just insane. If you watch him play, he's got like that insane edge work that you only see in like very few elite examples. I'm thinking Kale McCarr, I'm thinking McKinnon, I'm thinking McDavid. Like he has that type of skating, and that's what makes him really, really good. And fuck, is he gonna be fun to watch? I think it's mainly that. Like even if he doesn't turn into that next level superstar, he's gonna be so fun to watch at the NHL level. And I think I have a hard time seeing it not translate, but God, I'm excited to see what happens in the next few years with him. I think he's got a lot of really, really good talent, and it's gonna be pretty cool. I'm happy the Flames were able to get a guy like him. And there was a lot of conversation about who they should have gone with, especially after who got taken at 10, which again we'll talk about when we get there. But I think it's a good sign for the Flames as well that we went with Pareka over the guy that New Jersey took.
Yeah, and I think you're talking about wanting a forward,
Yeah.
not necessarily a defenseman. I do think after Cat and the forward depth kind of drops off a little
Yeah.
bit in the draft. Looking at even just the way the draft fell, you didn't see another forward taken until 13 with the Flyers, and even then, ESPN has that rated as a little bit of a reach. with Luchenko going at 13. They had him ranked as low as 26.
The I will say,
Um,
the only other forward I was seeing the Flames being rumored to take was Hellenis, who's the guy who Buffalo took at
yeah,
14.
yeah,
He was the other conversation that people were having. But yeah, I do know
yeah,
what you mean. Like the forward depth, absolutely, it falls off pretty much instantly for the most part. A lot of like in the mid first round, a lot of the talent is at defenseman. Like even after like when we start going down, like oh I'm gonna butcher this name as well, but Adam Juracek is another guy that I've heard about a lot. Who the
yeah,
Blues took at 16. Like there's a lot of really good defensemen in this class, but yeah, for the most part, yeah, looking back on it, I'm very happy we went with the player that we did. But at the time, I was a little like, huh? We have so much, mainly because the Flames have so much defensive depth, especially at like the prospect level. Like we have and offensive defensemen. Like think about like that. We already have a Brzestowicz, I think is how you pronounce it. Poirier as well at the AHL level. He's probably ready to make the jump to the NHL, assuming there isn't more injury issues. I think at least for the Flames, defenseman is not necessarily the biggest need prospect wise, but they took the best available, which you can't really get mad about, I
yeah.
guess.
And I mean, the Flames are in like the very start of a rebuild because we've seen all the moves they've been making. It's clear they're just starting to tear this roster down. Even look at what they did as of recently, where they traded Mangiapane, which I honestly think, in my opinion, was even more of a blow as a Flames fan than any of these bigger name trades like Lindholm or Markstrom. I think that was even more of a like
May
obviously not as big of a player, but like I think he has been one of their low key, like under the radar better players for the last couple of years. So it really shows they're kind of stripping the roster down to the skids. And I think even with those guys you listed, obviously we do have a couple of great prospects on defense and a couple of great prospects as offensive defensemen. But I really do just think if you're Craig Conroy, you have to go with best available player here. Um, this draft and maybe even the next draft after that. And then once you actually have a bit more of a semblance of a roster, whether it be through the draft or with other moves, then you can start to look more position of need and fill in the rest of the holes. Because for the Flames right now, I think the holes are just everywhere.
yeah, and I will say another reason I'm very happy we took Pareka is in comparison to who went next off the board. And I think what we were hearing from Craig Conroy before the draft, I believe he went on 960 and talked about it. But he said that a big thing that they were looking at is the physical side. They want a player who is not only skilled, but somebody who isn't afraid to lay the body and isn't afraid to be that physical type player, which is why I think it was a little worrying, considering the next prospect off the board that New Jersey took is Anton Silyev, a 6'7" defenseman from Russia. Doesn't that sound like Brad Trilliving's ideal player? But nonetheless, I am joking around and I'm making him sound a lot worse than he is. He is a very, very good player. ESPN had him ranked 8th. Devils got him at 10. And I think he is very, very strong on both sides of the play. Like, he could be a very, very good offensive player as well. Defense is where he shines, but that's not surprising considering he's 6'7", but he has that shot as well. The instant comparison that came the second he was drafted was Zdeno Chara, which I don't think should be surprising to anybody. I mean, strong defensively, insane shot, 6'7". Do I need to say
Yeah.
more? that
Yeah.
just that it sounds like I'm describing Chara, and I think that pretty much describes what the ceiling is for this guy. I think in a lot of ways he has the potential to be that next great defensive defenseman for New Jersey. They've had a lot of very good defensemen over there in their history, and I think he's got the chance to continue that. I mean, he's going to be a scary player to play against. I am in comparison. I am happy the Flames took Pareka. I do think Pareka is the better defenseman than Silyev, but I do still think that the Devils got a really good guy. And even if you want to go even further down with who we're going to talk about in a second here with San
Well,
Jose, like there was a lot of very good defensemen in the final things here.
yeah. I would the last thing I would say about Siliev before we move on is just the same point you make for Demidov, you can make for Siliev in terms of um, he's learned how to use that physicality playing in the KHL.
Yeah,
They talk about obviously my KHL knowledge is not like I can't really tell you
not a
anything
huge
as
KHL fan.
in terms of but no, not a huge KHL watcher, and if anybody is out there, I'd love to talk to you. But in this the ESPN article that they bring up said he played quote significant minutes for one of the KHL's better teams, and I think that is pretty telling, honestly. Um, just to say that they can put this 17-year-old kid out there and just like go do your thing, and they were winning with that. I think that's super impressive, especially on defense. And that's the kind of performance that you look like to say, okay, yeah, this guy is top 10 ready, even if the offense isn't necessarily there.
Yep, I think he is definitely he's definitely one of the guys that I wouldn't be surprised if they made an instant jump to the NHL. He's kind of already at that floor to at the very least be like a top three or no, not top three, top six guy. But nonetheless, I think we can move on to another defenseman on the board who a lot of people wanted the Flames to take in Sam Dickinson with the San Jose Sharks, and he played in London. He put up 70 points in 68 games and he's a very strong defenseman. He's another guy like Pareka who's a very, very strong skater. He's strong offensively, obviously, considering he was able to go over a point per game. Not quite the same offensive defenseman. He's not quite as explosive, but he's a lot more balanced, I think, is the way that I would put it. He's 6'2", just a touch under 200 pounds. And I don't know as much about him as the two guys above him, but I think this is when I started to peter off a little bit on the when I was watching the draft. But for the most part, good pick by San Jose. Like he was ranked 11 and he was taken at 11. Right? The only reason that there is any conversation about San Jose maybe not shouldn't have taken him is who went at 12, and we'll get to that when we get to that. But for the most part, very strong pick, very good pick.
Yeah, and I believe they traded up to get this pick, did they not? I don't remember who they traded with.
Is that right?
Um,
I don't remember.
yeah, I believe so. Either way, I think it's great to try to take advantage of this run of defensemen in the middle of the draft to pair somebody with Celebrini. I think that you kind of look at what the Blackhawks are doing right now by taking Bedard and then Leshnikov was his name, I believe. I'm already
Yeah,
running
no, that's
low
a
on
tough
some of
one.
these Russian names. But with that kind of you see Chicago's strategy of getting their star forward than getting their star defenseman. The Sharks are kind of hoping to get it all in one fell swoop here, and hopefully that pans out for them. Again, it's another guy I don't know as much about as well, but I think it's just a smart move roster building wise to try to kill two birds with one stone, take advantage of a really strong portion of the draft in a really strong draft, and get the guy they wanted.
Yep. I think we can move on. We can move on to Minnesota. After I almost think we should just do top 12. Looking back on it,
Yeah.
I think I'd be pretty okay with that cuz after 12 is when my knowledge goes bye-bye. But at 12 we have this is another name. This is the last name I'm going to mess up. But Z Buyem. Buyem, I think. I don't know how to pronounce his last name. But he ESPN had him ranked very highly as the sixth best best prospect. Minnesota gets him at 12. There were a lot of predictions about him going in the top 10. I think most people had him set to be that in that spot, and a lot of people were surprised that he was available for Minnesota. He feels like a very Minnesota Wild player, and I think the two Wild fans out there have to be pretty excited about getting this guy because he's going to be very, very good. He's got a very clear ceiling. I think he's a fairly sure thing. I think for the most part, He in 42 games in college, he was able to put up 50 points, which isn't necessarily as common at the defensive spot at the college level for a defenseman to be able to do that. So I think there is a lot of very, very good reasons that he was elevated to this level, in or at
Yep.
least to where people had him going. And I think I don't know. I am excited to see this guy play. I think if I were to give a prediction that we won't see the outcome of for years down the road, I think out of all the defensemen in this like middle group of like four defensemen, I think the best ones are probably going to be Zeev and Pareka.
Yeah.
Just
And I
based
mean, that
off,
kind of lines up.
yeah, and that lines up with what ESPN said as well. But
Yeah.
they are just the two
It'll
most
be,
obvious, I guess.
yeah, in terms of both how they were projected before and just in terms of their skill set. Um, just because I think Buiam looking like yes, he put up 50 points more than a point a game against some tough competition in college. But I think you also have to look at defensively just super well rounded. It's something we've brought up again and again. Just talking about how some of these prospects overly strong in one area or another. Even Pareka talking about a little bit more gifted on the offensive side. Silyev talking about more so um, kind of just a defensive hulking monster. Buiam is pretty balanced across the board. And when you're looking at that and looking for, okay, I'm going into this draft thinking, who's a sure thing? Who am I going to go into the next 3 to 5 years saying, confident this guy is going to work out and he's going to be playing on my NHL team, getting consistent minutes and performing. I think Buiam is probably one of the top guys that you look at and say, um, I can fairly confidently say that in the future, um, he's going to be contributing quite a bit.
Buyem and Faber as a pairing in like 4 years is one of the scariest things I've heard of in a while. That is a scary,
Yeah.
scary idea over that. What they're building in Minnesota right now, they've been building it for a while now, but I think it has the potential to be really good. I think people I think have been sleeping on Minnesota a lot, including myself. In the next like I don't necessarily mean next year, but I think in the next few years, I think Minnesota they have a lot of very good prospects. They've really built a really good room. I think I don't know. I think they have the chance to be really good if things work out for them well. I think there's a lot of things that could go their well or go their way. So yeah, I think I don't know if we necessarily need to hit on the rest because I mean Jet Lachenko is where my knowledge is gone. I did not know much about him before the draft. I'd be reading to you what ESPN says. But anyway, there you go. That's our draft coverage, or at least attempt on it. Um, yeah, I don't know how to wrap this up. Subscribe. So, last week the NHL Finals and NHL Stanley Cup playoffs wrapped up, and we saw Florida win in Game 7 after losing 3 straight in what was an absolutely insane just finals as a whole, with obviously Florida winning the first 3, Edmonton winning 2, or yeah, Edmonton winning 3 straight. We went to Game 7, and in the final game, we saw Florida come out in a 2-1 victory in what ended up being a pretty entertaining game and a pretty entertaining aftermath for the most part, which is where most of my memories I think came from with this game, watching everything that happened afterwards. But yeah, it was pretty cool to watch. I think out of all like the game sevens that we've gotten, this one felt very very big and like momentous. I think because it
Yeah.
really was. It was the battle. It was McDavid's legacy versus a team that felt like they were destined to win. Is kind of how I
And I
describe it.
mean, and the storyline that you brought in at the top. I think that overshadows everything else. Was the potential of a reverse sweep,
Yeah,
right? I think that overshadows a lot of it. And I think going into this game 7, I honestly didn't think there would be. I'm not thinking there wouldn't be a way for Florida to win, but just saying
I
I
think
don't
that's what
know if
everyone
I'm
thought.
Florida. I think. if I'm Florida, you're looking at this and saying, "Oh no, like
It's
we have the
storybook.
chance to have something happen to us that hasn't happened since 1942." Then the pressure is really on. And I thought it was really interesting hearing Opozo, I think it was, in the post game interview talking about once they got to Game 7, they were able to kind of reframe their thinking and say the pressure, like we've given up this lead. It's almost like the pressure is off. All you need to go out and do is just win the game, and you win the Stanley Cup. It's all it is. It's a best of one. You just
Yeah.
win the game tomorrow. That's all you have to think
It's
about.
the Super
And I
Bowl. You
think
only got
that
to win
was
one.
that. Yeah, that honestly was more impressive than anything, and you can kind of see it in how they got back to their style. Where I remember we talked about when the Oilers were down 3-0. One of the things I talked about was the Oilers needing a fast start in Game 4, and I think they did that in every single game
They
because I
did.
think Florida is not a team. It's not a team built to play from behind,
Can I give you a
and
quick
in
stat to
this,
add to your take there? The
yeah, yeah,
Panthers
go
jumped
for
to
it.
an early lead after gaining, or they had a lead or the Oilers had a. Oh my God, I'm tripping all over the place. I'm trying to. This is written terribly, but basically the Oilers had the advantage or the first advantage for 184 minutes of the finals, which would be like 2.5 games.
Yeah,
So I
and that
think
happened pretty much. That was
so.
pretty
What you
much all
predicted
in the
happened,
last three.
basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, which is what happens anytime I predict anything.
Game 7, that didn't
Um,
happen.
but no, Game 7 that didn't happen. You obviously see Edmonton did a good job of kind of trying to neutralize that because as soon as Florida scores, you get Yanmark going down and answering within, I believe, 5 minutes. But I think more than anything, it was just clear like when Florida kept it close and then regained that lead, they weren't going to give it up. Um,
Hmm.
because you just look at how good defensively Florida is. That's how they're built to play. Like their number one star player is at least their number one star forward, I should say, is their Selke winning forward. This is a defensive team that's built to get a lead, capitalize off of turnovers, and once they get that lead, protect it like nothing else, and just continue to be opportunistic, continue to take what the other team gives you, and just not let up any good chances. And we saw that with the Stanley Cup winning goal, I think, by Reinhart. I think it
Yeah.
encapsulated the entire series more than anything because Edmonton gets a great chance at one end, and after that chance, they leave the door open for Florida to get a rush going the other way. They leave Reinhart open on the wing, and he puts it where Skinner can't get it. And I think that kind of shows the series more than anything, where Edmonton gets solid chances and they probably play better offensively, and just Florida takes advantage of the chances they have. Their finishing was just so much better than Edmonton, and I think that more than anything is what won them that series. That 20-minute stretch, or not 20-minute, that 20-second stretch of just Oilers missing their chance, Florida converting. If you had to sum up this series in a sentence, I think that's how you would do it.
Yeah. And yeah, I think the point you made with Barkov is really important because of how big his part was in Florida winning this. Like his shutdown ability, even if it wasn't as apparent in like the last like 3 games before the finals or before Game 7, it was still there. Like he is so. I think what I remember to bring it back. I don't remember when Gretzky said this off the top of my head. It might have been the conference finals. But Gretzky made the comment about Barkov's defensive ability, saying he was the best defensive player he has seen since Trottier, I think, which is 80s. And a lot of
Yeah.
people immediately came out and went, excuse me, Mr. Gretzky, Bergeron. Ever heard the name? But I think Barkov really did take what Gretzky said there and kind of show it off a little bit. And especially, I probably would have been one of those people going, excuse me, have you ever heard the name Bergeron? This run absolutely changed my mind on it a little bit. I don't think a prime Bergeron, I don't think could have done what Barkov did in that series, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, I think it was just
Especially against.
insanely impressive. Barkov is a different player.
Mhm. especially against the type of talent that Edmonton has, right? I think Edmonton has some of the best offensive. I mean, it all starts with McDavid, but I think they have some of the best offensive talent that we've seen in a Cup final in the last few years. Because this is McDavid in his prime, and he's got the supporting cast now to pay it off. I think to kind of speaking of McDavid, I don't know if we want to get into this at all. I'll just kind of maybe throw the question out to you. What do you think about McDavid winning the Conn Smythe despite not winning the cup?
Um, I, it felt right. I mean, you can't. The insane run that we saw McDavid go on was very. I don't even know how to explain it. Like, the run he went on made it very deserving, but it also felt wrong because there were so many players on Florida who deserved it as well. Like, I think Barkov was a guy who I would have had absolutely no issue with being awarded it. Like, Bobrovsky was obviously the other one. His argument for it kind of got worn down early. Like, I think, was it Game 5, the game where he got just blown out? Like, I don't remember which game it was. Game 4. Yeah, like
Game 4 in the 8-1 game where he got pulled.
That's the one. Yeah, like it was stuff like that I think if that didn't happen, I think Bobrovsky would have won it. Honestly, I think McDavid earned it. I think he absolutely earned the right to call himself one of the few players to ever be named a Conn Smythe winner despite not winning the cup. I think that kind of describes McDavid's career in a really funny way, actually, if you want to look at it like that. Like
yeah, I think so.
Like, winning the Conn Smythe without winning the cup is pretty much exactly what you would almost expect out of the Oilers at this point, from what we've seen the last few years with them. And
I mean, it's for McDavid, it's the individual awards without the team success, right?
Yeah,
I think that's kind of been his whole story. I think it was also pretty telling. I saw some people getting mad about this, which I'm like, really, like, calm down, about him not going out to accept it. Which,
did he not
if I was McDavid,
I don't even remember that.
No, he didn't. He didn't step out of the locker room to accept it. Which I honestly think I would have been more like upset if he did go out to accept it. Because if you just lost the Stanley Cup, yeah, I mean, obviously, like, he doesn't even have to celebrate. Like, but even just coming out of the locker room and kind of leaving your teammates to go pick up this meaningless trophy at this point, like, I don't know. I think that would reflect on him more poorly than not taking it.
I think either way it would have reflected on him poorly, to be honest with you. If he went out there to accept it, people would have gotten mad at him. When he didn't go out to accept it, people got mad at him. I don't think there was winning for that, right? Because, like,
that's fair.
Think about it like this. I mean, if he had gone out, it would have been like he goes out, he goes, yay, like, doesn't even smile, does this McDavid robot thing, and then goes back to the locker room. That'd be it. Like, it's not like he'd celebrate.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if he went out there like it was the Stanley Cup one. Yeah! Yeah! Start, like, skating around with it. Now, that would have been a spectacle. Yeah. That would have been pretty legendary. But
that never would have happened.
You know what? Actually, just imagine.
Any player in NHL history doing that. I can't see any player in NHL history.
Imagine, like, as a fuck you. Because, like, a lot of... Another thing I noticed when they were handing out the Conn Smythe and announced it to McDavid is a lot of Florida players went over and gave Bobrovsky a pat on the back as kind of like a, it should have gone to you. Don't worry about it. This is yours, basically. This, like, that's a fake trophy over there. You earned it, right? Type thing. I think it would have been real as as for the comedy of it. It would have been absolutely hilarious if McDavid took that trophy and just started skating around the rink. Would that have not been the funniest thing? That was the funniest thing he could have done, but obviously he didn't because McDavid's a robot and doesn't know what comedy is.
Well, I don't even think if you're not a robot, like, I don't think there's any way you do that. Like, I can't see anybody in their right mind. It would have been funny, but
nobody would do it. I'm just saying that it would make for a pretty good SNL skit is more what I mean.
Yeah. If we want to talk a little bit more about the Oilers, there's been some interesting news in the last couple days, I think, where Ken Holland is not coming back as their GM.
Right.
Um, there's Draisaitl contract talks upcoming. Surprisingly, I was listening to 32 Thoughts, the Elliot Friedman Jeff Merrick podcast, and
Yeah.
they brought up McDavid's contract, and I kind of thought, isn't McDavid signed like basically to infinity? No, he's only got
No.
2 years left on his deal. Not like they're not going to get it done, because obviously they are. You do anything, but the number's
Give
going
him
to
the
go up. There's
house.
going to be a lot. You're going to have a lot more space, and I think that's a big concern for the Oilers, because you have to start looking at guys whose contracts are also up this year, like Janmark and Connor Brown and Adam Henrique, and say, are we able to keep you? And I think when you're having to look at that, I think, especially in the Stanley Cup final, that fourth line was their best line. That fourth line and the opportunities they got played almost better than the full lines of like the line of McDavid, Hyman, Nugent Hopkins. Well, McDavid was amazing. That fourth line was so opportunistic. Janmark and Brown were killer on the penalty kill.
Think of that
You just
like
saw them
Cody
provide so
Ceci
much
to
energy.
Janmark pass in the second period for
Yes,
the Oilers.
absolutely. Absolutely. And because that's how it had been all series, right? Like the Oilers outscored the Panthers on the Panthers power plays because of Janmark and Brown. And for all the shit we gave Connor Brown throughout the entire year, he showed up big time in the playoffs and particularly the finals. And I think
Yeah.
at this point, losing him and losing some of these depth pieces, I think that takes away the reason the Oilers got to the Cup final. Because I mean, the Oilers are always if they're gonna get to the Cup final, they're going to do it because of McDavid. But McDavid can't do it alone, and that's what we've been seeing for the last like 5 years. And I think this is the first year they've actually had a solid foundation underneath that, and it already feels like the rug's kind of getting ripped out from them already.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't disagree with you. I think I to bring it back to the contract talks with McDavid because I think that's really really interesting. If you're McDavid, why are you staying? Was the question I was going to ask you.
Mm.
What has Edmonton given you that makes you want to stay compared to what you could get somewhere else? Like I'm just talking
Yeah.
about like depth. I'm talking about talent around you. Sure, Draisaitl. Edmonton got lucky with that one. But if Draisaitl wasn't there, just look at the depth that Edmonton has or McDavid has been working with his entire career, right? Other than those like top few guys, it's been pretty bad. I guess in recent years it's changed a bit, but even with that, I am wondering you got to wonder if McDavid's kind of looking at greener pastures, right? Like what if could go to Vegas. Could go anywhere. Anybody would take McDavid, right? Like you could go like
Does
so.
anybody have the cap space for McDavid without kind of splicing their
Oh,
roster in half?
people would make space for McDavid.
That's what I mean. That's what I'm. Okay, let me rephrase that. Everybody has the cap space for McDavid, but then you don't have the cap space for like anybody else. Like if he goes to a Vegas, then you're not going to have room for anybody
Caleb, are
else,
you
right?
saying if you're a general manager, you wouldn't be willing to do that?
Oh, I'm absolutely saying I'm willing to do that. But I
Exactly.
mean,
So
at what
every
point
GM's going to
do
do
the
that.
greener? But yeah, of course. But at what point do the greener pastures become less green because you have to tank your entire roster just to get them on your team, right? Like I think that's the argument against like leaving to somewhere else, because a lot of the teams that are better are because of the depth that they have and because of the completeness of their roster. And I think even though
Because of the
obviously you
fact
do
that they're
anything
not
to get
playing
McDavid on your
paying a
team,
guy 15 million.
yeah, pretty much. Pretty much, because I mean, you can manipulate cap space and you can shift things around and you can backload deals and you can do all this magic, but it does come due eventually. And yeah, it's the reason the Oilers have been able to perform well in this specific window is because McDavid's on the back year of at the back end of an 8-year deal, so he's getting paid under value. Same thing with Draisaitl. You've got players like Bouchard who are on younger deals and are going to be looking to get paid. Like I do think everything kind of lined up right this year, which not to say that I don't think they can get it done next year or any year in the future. I'm sure McDavid's going to get a cup, but the math becomes difficult, I think.
Yeah, I do agree with that. That is a good point. I wasn't necessarily thinking about it like that. I think even though McDavid is technically undervalued, he's still making like $12 million.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it's
but
so.
would you not agree that that is undervalued for the type of player that he is, right?
Yeah,
Because I think
he's gonna
I think
reset the market. That's
I
for
think
sure.
Oh yeah, I think that number is because if he isn't the highest paid player in the NHL by a large margin, which I don't believe he is, then
He
he's not
isn't.
getting paid enough.
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
not. I don't think I don't I think he's close, but he's not that close. Like I think the highest is probably like 12 and a half maybe. Maybe I don't know if anybody's hit 13 yet. I don't think. But
I think think McDavid might be around 12.
yeah,
Um,
that's what I thought. I thought McDavid was around 12. But anyway, it it's certainly an interesting conversation to have though. Just even with like
yeah,
I think this year might
McDavid
have
is
saved it.
3. McDavid is just. I'll sorry, finish your thought, but I just wanted to say Matthews is one at 13, 13-2, then McKinnon at 12-6, then McDavid at 12-5.
Oh, so there is someone at 13 already. Okay.
Yeah,
Then I wonder if McDavid's contract in 2 years is going to be 15.
it probably will be.
Yeah.
It
Isn't that
probably will
crazy?
be.
That's not even an
Yeah.
unrealistic thing to think about. Which, so
Yeah.
I, which is like now that's a $7 million player and an $8 million player right there. Like think if you
Yeah.
think about it like that, like it's ooh that's steep, right? But I think the Oilers showed this year that you can win while or can nearly win while paying a guy 12 million. Why can't you win with 15 or something? I don't know. Shit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's just everything together, right? Like I think that you do have to play kind of a Stanley Cup finalist tax to a certain extent to say all of our players performed well, so whenever they go to free agency, especially those depth guys, they're going to get paid a lot more. So yes, they
Yeah.
can pay McDavid 15 million and still be able to keep a lot of their guys, but I just think the whole puzzle isn't going to be able to fit together anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. I more just mean like I wonder if McDavid's starting to get fatigued with the situation in Edmonton is more what I mean. I think this year might frame things a little bit different for him, at least in like just the
Yeah.
sense of like they finally got that real playoff success they've been looking for, but it's
I
it's
do think
something that
this
has
year
been missing.
changes a lot.
Yeah.
I do think this year changes a lot. I do wonder if the Ken Holland thing changes anything because Holland is really the
True.
person who built this team. He's been there for a while. Um,
Yep.
he's obviously not been perfect. He's had some questionable moves, but you look at the team as a whole and you say, yeah, that was his creation. As McDavid, especially with 2 years, is not a lot of time for a GM to prove himself. So you wonder if there's trust in the roster construction there. Um, yeah, I don't know. It'll be really interesting. I don't think McDavid will leave. I just don't think. I
I
just
don't
don't
think
think.
either.
I
I
know
was
there.
it was a
I know there.
hypothetical.
Yeah, I just don't think. I think you're right to put out that hypothetical because it's not like he's had the most team success, and there should be a lot more for how good of a player he is. I just think that superstars this big don't leave their team, and I mean, you can look at Gretzky maybe, but that was a trade. That wasn't Gretzky wanting out. Um, Otherwise, like Lemieux, a Penguin his whole career. You look at Crosby, a Penguin his whole career. You look at Ovechkin, a Capital his whole career. Like I just don't think players of McDavid's caliber generally leave unless there's some huge extenuating circumstance like there was with Gretzky.
Yeah. That is a good point. I wasn't necessarily thinking about that part. I'm it it would just be really funny if he left.
I
It's more that.
I do think this I do think this might be your wishful thinking, Flames fan.
Yes, no, absolutely. I won't deny that. But imagine just like wishful thinking even more. Imagine a world where it's Chicago picks up McDavid and they have like a Connor Bedard McDavid line
Fifth
and
on
it's
our
in the
line.
East.
Connor Bedard, Brown, and McDavid. Look at you go. There's the best
Oh
line in hockey.
shit. Oh, are we talking about Chicago or fucking Team Canada out here? Connor Brown, are you
Yeah,
kidding
look
me?
at him go.
Yeah, that is the most
I
elite
don't.
line.
Although honestly, after the Cup Finals, I don't even know if that's like that much of a joke. Connor Brown was amazing. Like I was like, oh, I'm eating my words here. Um,
Connor Brown proved you
Obviously,
wrong.
still, I, we joke, but honestly, with how he played in the Cup Finals. Not maybe the role they envisioned for him playing alongside McDavid, but as a fourth line, like a fourth, third line energy guy, bottom six energy guy, and a elite penalty killer. Ooh, yeah, I
Mm.
want him on my team. Um,
Well,
if we
I
want to
think
kind of wrap the,
yeah, I was gonna say if we want to
I,
wrap up,
I,
I want to talk about the celebration because that there's a lot of stuff
and
in
we
there
can,
that I think we should have that talk about that.
yeah, and just to kind of talk about the Panthers too, because I feel like we
Mm.
focused a lot on the Oilers, obviously being in Canada, but the Panthers are the Cup champions, and they are for good reason.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean they're the Cup champions because they were the better team. That was the conversation we were having before
Yeah.
the finals. That was the conversation we were having during. It's the conversation we probably were having while Edmonton was winning those 3 games. Edmonton wasn't winning because they were the better team. They were winning because they got hot. And I think it ended up I think the better team won is more what I mean. I think Florida when I say that Florida felt like they were destined to win, I kind of mean it. Like it's from the beginning, at least to me, it felt like they were the team. They were the team to beat once they beat. I believe it was the Hurricanes, or was it the Rangers? Who I don't even remember. Exactly, I don't even
Well,
remember.
it beat Tampa round one, Boston round two, Rangers round three.
That's what it was. Once they beat the Rangers, it very much felt like I remember saying like, it was those 2 teams out of the East that were the teams to beat. If the Rangers went, they would have been the team to beat. When Florida went, they became the team to beat, and I think they showed that really well. I think they showed that exactly how good of a team they have built in the last 2 years. To go to the finals last year, lose to a very good Vegas team. This year they came back even better and showed everybody up and looked really really good the almost the entire run. Like they looked unbeatable for almost the entire run. So it's at least to me, I think good for them. Florida has deserved a cup for a long time. I think they have had to deal with a lot of very bad teams, and seeing Luongo lift the cup after that entire thing was awesome. Like I think that was
Yeah,
probably one of the feel good. That was probably the feel good moment of this entire run. This entire year almost
yeah,
was getting to see him lift it.
and I mean, there's Luongo, but there's also, I mean, like I think as someone who was cheering for the Oilers in the Cup final, my dad is a huge Oilers fan, and I wanted them to win it for him. As much as I was cheering for the Oilers because of that, as soon as the Panthers won and kind of the tension was resolved and you kind of get the reality of the situation, it's still a fan. Like there's so many good stories on that team, and there's so many people to be happy for. You talk about Luongo, but I think you also talk about Paul Maurice.
Yeah,
I thought his post
yeah.
game interview with Sportsnet was fantastic.
They handed him the
Um,
cup halfway
and
through.
yeah, yeah, like his reaction to that. Um, I think he had a couple of the best quotes of the night with both. A, I've never hugged so many sweaty men in my life. That was a great quote. Um, but also the part where he was talking to his family back home and saying like, "Dad, my name's now on the cup with all your heroes like Richard, Beliveau, and now Maurice." And that was just like
Yeah.
such a cool sentiment. I thought one of the most well thought out Stanley Cup post game quotes, like, because normally it's mostly guys who are like Ekblad, just like,
Yeah.
"Oh, fuck.
That
I
was
can't
so
believe
funny.
it. Sorry for swearing."
Yeah.
A lot of the time it's just like that where they're just
Didn't
like,
even
"Oh yeah, I
bleep it.
can't
It's
believe
just
it. Oh my
like
god."
that's why the
Um,
celebration for the cup is always I think it's the best in sports by far.
I would
Like
agree with that.
yeah, I think cuz like you can talk about how big like a Super Bowl win or how big winning an NBA championship is, but when people talk about how the Stanley Cup is the hardest championship to win, I don't think a lot of fans of other sports realize exactly how grueling it is. Like all of these players are playing with broken bones. They are broken at that point, quite literally. Like there were talks about, I think Drysaitel was playing with a broken finger or something like that. McDavid, there
And
was an
rib.
and
Broken finger
rib.
and rib.
McDavid, like they didn't release McDavid's injuries. They pretty much, I think they were trying to keep it under wraps actually, but it was kind of, it was clear something was hurt. They just didn't want to release it with McDavid. And I think literally the one thing they said is he will be ready for next season. That is all they gave us on McDavid, which is like a little ominous. But regardless,
Yeah.
like when like because of those facts that when they actually get to lift the cup, God, it is like absolute just pure joy. Like even when it's not your team lifting it, I always love watching the celebration because it's like you just have to feel
Oh
good
yeah.
for them. Like I think even if
I
Edmonton
think
had won, I feel like I probably would have still stuck around and felt that, right? Like cuz you can
yeah.
feel the emotion and everything that went into it.
Yeah. And I think the big difference, you talk about the difference between this and like a Super Bowl, even though the Super Bowl gets a lot more attention. I think you're right in terms of the just grueling nature of the Stanley Cup Finals. Like it takes twice as long. I mean, we started this journey back in April, right? It's
Yeah.
been like 2.5 months since it started. Well, the NFL playoffs only takes
Four
how
weeks, 5 weeks.
divisional 4 weeks, 4 weeks with a week or 5 weeks with a week break in the middle there for the Pro
Yeah.
Bowl. Um, and yeah, there's that part of it, but I also think just the presentation of it is another thing. Um, the because you look at the lap with the cup, every single player getting their moment, just in the spotlight to say like this really is a team sport. Look at all the people who helped us get there. Every player has their own story. Every player has their own moment. You get to see guys like Bobrovsky and Ekblad who have played in the league forever and never lifted the cup. You get to see again guys like Maurice or Luongo who have been in the league even longer and maybe didn't get the chance to lift a cup when they thought they would. Maurice in his past 20 years as a coach, Luongo as a player, but now they're finally getting the chance. Like everybody gets their own individual moment, whereas in the Super Bowl, that doesn't necessarily happen. You kind of just climb up
Yeah.
to the top and like Michael Strahan hands you the Lombardi and it's like, here you go, jump. And then
Here
they
you
shoot the
go,
confetti and
buddy.
that's pretty much it.
Good job in your
Yeah.
one snap.
Or in like the
Which
NBA where they hand it to the owner first, which just like makes me
yeah.
throw up in my mouth a little
Well,
bit.
and if we want to talk about individual moments, with Knight getting the chance to pick it up at the very end, like
Yeah,
there's been a lot of coverage on what he's had to go through in the last little bit to like be able to play. Them allowing him to go out there, get dressed in his equipment, even though he didn't play or sit on the bench. Like him getting to go out there and lift the cup felt like a very cool moment. Like it just shows like
yeah,
even the players who didn't get the chance to play in the final game or play in the finals or even in the season, I don't think for him, like it still shows what players like that meant to the team. Like it really
yeah,
feels like these teams when you are able to get this far, like I don't know, it means so much more. I think being able to share that moment with all of those people, right? And you really get to see that with just the way they like nobody takes too long holding the cup. Like everybody is pretty quick to pass it on, and it's just because you want it to get to everybody. You want everybody to get their moment, and you don't always see that in every sport. Like I mean, there was the
yeah,
I we I kind of made fun of it at the end of our last episode of Jason Tatum trying to recreate the Kobe photo, right? And it's stuff like that. Like you see a lot of that in like the NBA and NFL where players are a lot more this is my win, I did it. While in the NHL it's not really that. It's very different. It's a very and it's not unknown that that's how the culture is in the NHL. It kind of just is what it is. That's something we've all known
yeah,
for a long time. But it was still this year felt very cool compared to like watching Tampa Bay win it for the third year in a row or watching Colorado win it.
yeah,
Like watching teams that actually have like a winning past. Florida doesn't have that. This is really their
yeah,
first. Like that city in hockey has gone through hell. Like
yeah.
they have been.
And mhm.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say not just the city. I mean, you look at the players. I think Tarasenko was the only person on that roster who I was like, oh yeah, like definitely won a cup before. Like everybody, I can't think of anybody else off the top of my head where I'm like, oh yeah, I remember them winning a cup. I'm sure there's probably another person, but You look at obviously
There's definitely
Barkov,
another person, but
Ekblad,
it's slipping
yeah,
by me.
I know. There's definitely another person, but it's like most of the core of this roster: Barkov, Ekblad, Bobrovsky, even guys like Ekman Larson who have been in the league forever and not won a cup. It's just like this huge moment of catharsis for, like you pointed out, the city and the fans, but I think also pretty much all the players in this roster. It's not just a repeat cup champion, where even though they're obviously thrilled and it is still this huge moment of catharsis, they've been there before. This just felt like the long culmination of something for Florida, and that's a pretty special moment to see. I also think it's special just to see kind of all of the facades kind of break, especially you talk about hockey culture, where you see these players in post-game interviews after every game, and that's why like pucks in deep is such a stereotype because they really are just kind of giving stock answers a lot of the time. You don't get a lot out of these players, but after they've won the Stanley Cup, you really see their true personality shine through, which is why I
Yeah.
think that last 20 minutes after the game is over is just some of the most like spectacular TV you can see.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. Ekblad's was really funny, like because yeah, he just swore, and then I don't know if you caught it, but when he went to go when he was lifting the cup, I think they had to like slightly lower the volume on like the thing. I heard I heard at least once of him going, "Oh fuck yeah!" Like he was definitely living it a little bit, which is fair. Yeah, when you make it to that spot in that sport, it's definitely that sort of feeling, right? Like I'm sure.
Yeah, drafted 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
First overall,
Yeah,
2014.
I guess so. Holy. But yeah, no, out of all the players there, Ekblad has really had to fight through some shit. Because he's fought through injuries. He's fought through like expectations. Hell, he was a first overall pick. Like there's a lot. I think Ekblad's story is really cool as well. Getting to see him win the cup was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that Panthers team as a whole was very deserving. And them beating Edmonton just made it that much better.
I do wish Edmonton had won, not because I like the Oilers or anything, but I think if there was any team any other team other than Edmonton or really anybody else in the playoffs who I would say I want them to win the cup, it would be Florida. So it was a great series. I'm glad. I think even if you were cheering for Florida the whole way through, you can say you're glad for the Oilers' comeback because it made it all that much more entertaining and turned what was almost a sweep into one of the better Stanley Cup Finals we've seen in recent memory, at least in my opinion.
I think in most people's opinion, like that, like it is insane how good of a Cup final that was.
Yeah, and particularly I do want to shout out the one moment before we finish up here. I think one of the coolest last 2 minutes of the game in Game 5 it was, I believe, where there was the two empty net chances that Edmonton had, where Janmark put it off the post and then tried to get the rebound on the post and missed it by about an inch. And then you go down, they get another empty net chance. Kachuk gets it diving with the stick and like inches away from the goal line, only to give it right back to McDavid to put it in the net. That was one of the best like empty net sequences I've seen in like any game ever with those two chances. It was just a super cool final, super cool atmosphere in both arenas, honestly. Edmonton, which we expected, Florida, which maybe some people wouldn't have.
I don't think anybody would have.
It was just it was the whole package all around. I hope next year's Stanley Cup final can live up to this bar that's been set. All right. So, in this week's latest edition of the Trick Play Nepotism Report, Bronny James was drafted with the 55th overall pick in the NBA draft, and it is really interesting, very interesting draft year, because the biggest story, I think, of the NBA draft is the 55th overall pick.
Yep.
This is because obviously the lineage here of it being LeBron's son going to LeBron's team, but also just because of how kind of poor this draft was all around. It's made for some interesting stories, some interesting, potentially kind of toxic discourse out there. because we've talked about it before in terms of if Bronny wasn't LeBron's son, he's probably not getting drafted, considering, well, he was a good high school prospect, and coming out of USC, obviously had the heart defect, which by no means can you fault him for, but it led to him not playing at all at USC and not being spectacular when he played, and then just deciding to go into the NBA draft from there without really getting. He's basically coming straight out of high school, is how I'm looking at it. So to
Yeah,
draft a
that's true.
guy straight out of high school who showed a whole lot of nothing in college, um, it's obviously a big shot in the dark, and a lot of people are kind of pointing fingers and saying, um, yeah, this draft spot is has LeBron's name written all over it, and if LeBron had retired or wasn't on the Lakers anymore or a litany list of other reasons, Bronny wouldn't have got drafted. What do you think, Simon? Do you think Bronny would have got drafted if this wasn't if LeBron didn't have influence, or is this pretty much all that is?
No, he wouldn't have gotten drafted. He's a fine player. Like for the most part, he's an undrafted prospect. Is what he should have been. But obviously, that's not the case now, as he got drafted by the Lakers and is now going to get probably 20 minutes from the podcaster, aka the head coach, JJ Redick. And it's going to be, as somebody who has been a fan of the Lakers, it's pretty shitty. It's pretty shitty to watch, honestly. I'm not a huge fan of this entire situation. If it works out by some miracle, and Bronny actually turns into a good player, then terrific. But I think the odds of that are not high. I think I just don't know. I just don't know. I don't see much in him that necessarily makes me very confident. The one point a lot of people have made is the fact that it's not like this is the first time it's happened, which is true. Like a lot of people pointed out, Giannis and his brothers. Like a lot of Giannis's brothers wouldn't have gotten drafted either if it wasn't for Giannis and the Bucks, which is a good point. But I think it just kind of shows the control that LeBron has on the Lakers at this point, despite being 40 at this point, right? And us not winning anything in the last little bit. Like it is just very very
What
crazy to
about the
think about.
in-season tournament, Simon? You won last year. You won the in-season tournament. What do you mean?
That no comment. I Lakers have drained my love of basketball. It is they're a hard team to watch these days. But you know what? It's all right. We're gonna ride a 4-year-old LeBron James out into the sunset, and then have nothing. We're gonna have
Well,
Anthony
there you
Davis
go.
with like one knee. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be great, and Bronny James. That's gonna be the whole team. It's gonna be terrific. I mean, it's not like second round picks in the NBA ever really turned into anything usually, except for like a few rare circumstances, which is the main reason that it's you can kind of look at it as a whatever. It doesn't necessarily matter in the
Yeah.
grand scheme of things, but it is kind of just the type of thing where it's they could have gotten him undrafted as well. That was an option. Like it's not
Well,
like
other
you think
teams.
someone would
So
have taken him.
I think that is other teams were looking into him. I think one of the more interesting stories to come out of it that kind of links to this is his agent kind of coming out. I don't know if it was directly or through somebody else. I think it was through somebody else on ESPN or something. But basically coming out and saying, yeah, if any team that's not the Lakers drafts Bronny, he's going to go play in Australia. He's not playing for your team. So, which I think just really says the quiet part loud, right?
Going
The
to play
Lakers
in
were getting him pretty
Australia.
much no matter what. Yeah,
Hmm.
which I thought was just such a strange turn to things, which indicates maybe there was other interest. I just thought that whole situation was really strange.
Nepotism. Isn't it
Yeah.
sick?
Yeah.
I mean, why
Um,
wouldn't you do that if
I
you're
do.
Bronny though? Like, it's not like money's an issue. Might as well just sign for nothing and like for like a 55th overall pick salary instead of getting drafted like what 40th. He was never going to be a first round
Yeah.
pick, even
Yeah.
if there was interest. I think the only team I ever heard linked to him was Phoenix, and Phoenix would have been late in the
And
second round as
Toronto
well.
to an extent.
Really? I
I
didn't
heard
hear
Toronto
Toronto.
as well. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. It's definitely I don't know. I know a lot of people. There's two sides to it. There's the side of like why why do we have Bronny James on our roster? He's not an actual NBA prospect. He's literally just here for the name. And there's the other side of things of people who just don't actually care that much because of the fact that it's not uncommon. It's not unprecedented, is the way to look at it, I
I think
guess.
I think I do kind of want to provide one more side. I read
Sure.
this really interesting article on the score, basically kind of going to town against all the people criticizing Bronny and the pick. And he made some good points. Basically talking about how and we talked about this a little bit last time we talked about Bronny. The NBA draft does work a lot differently than drafts in any other sports. Only 2 rounds, and that's for a reason, because a lot of the time most of the clear talent is gone in like the first 10 to 15 picks,
Yeah.
and everything after that is a pretty big lottery ticket, especially in the second round. And this author, I don't have the article right in front of me, so I don't remember who it was. It was on the score. I'm sure if you're interested you could go find it. But his point was basically saying so many NBA teams will basically use these second round picks just to place dibs on this very very raw like European prospects who chances are will never become anything. But if
Just in
the
case.
1% chance that they work out, yeah, if the 1% chance that they work out hits, then they have the rights to him, and there you go. And I do think, I mean, Bronny James, you can look at it in the same way, because it is, if you take away the LeBron name from it, he was still one of the most highly recruited high school prospects coming into college, and there is still obviously talent there. And I think for us to say like, yeah, is he worth a lottery ticket, to say he maybe wasn't given the best shot in college just because of health issues that were A, beyond his control, and B, now solved um, from all sides. Um, I think that's absolutely worth a lottery ticket. And I think it's where the points come in if you try to separate it from the LeBron thing, because I think that's where things get kind of um, muddied, and you bring in the nepotism part. I
Yeah.
think kind of just saying like lay off Bronny a little bit, because um, A, it's not his fault he's LeBron's kid. B, it's not his fault that he had the heart defect. And C,
True.
it is the 55th overall pick. The chance that a 55th overall pick hits is already pretty much nothing. So
Yeah.
if the Lakers waste this, then what did they really lose?
Yeah, I guess that's a good point, and that's kind of what I mean by it's like when I said earlier, like it doesn't actually matter in the grand scheme of things. You're just wasting a roster spot and throwing away a lottery ticket is what I describe it more as. Because you said like you're there's still a chance with LeBron with Bronny. I don't see that potential. He's an undersized shooting guard whose main skill is defensively. He's got the size of a point guard, but he hasn't shown that he actually can run an offense at any level ever, not even high school. Like he's been a shooting guard almost his entire career, and he's 6'1", which is very short for a shooting guard. His shooting has potential shooting. Like he's shown that he can shoot at the next level, but can he get to that level of like the shooting like the players like I don't know, like a player who can solely rely on his shooting to stay in the league? Can he get to that level? I don't know if he's that good. Like it's the type of thing where he's not. He arguably, despite being LeBron's kid, doesn't even have the physicals to a certain degree. Like
Mm.
he's not big enough is the big conversation, right? It's just he didn't get the height, right? That
Yeah.
is the main thing. Like he's just very undersized is mainly where I fall on it. A lot of like defensive guards, you don't see them being undersized to that degree. Like I think like Patrick Beverly, right? He's the only comparison I can think of that's like that. Where Patrick Beverly, I believe, is 6'2", so similar size to Bronny. Beverly can play point guard, is the main difference I think. He can
Mm.
play point guard. He can pass. If you need him to shoot, I don't know why you would, but I'm sure he can shoot. Like it's I don't see that same potential in Bronny. Which is why I mean, like, I think his potential to be a good role player is low. I think his potential to be a star or anything like that is zero, none. Like I don't think that there's any potential there.
But I mean, I think that's also the point. You're not looking for a star. You're looking for someone with the potential to slide into the roster in the future.
Yeah, but
even if it's
even when
low,
you're drafting role players, even when you're drafting a role player, right? Like let's talk about like a second round guy who is similar to Bronny, right? Like a defensive shooter who can play shooting guard. There were probably better options for prospects like that than Bronny.
Yeah.
Which is why there was 15 players in the first round taken before him. Like or 25 or whatever. Like that's more what in that sense.
There obviously was, and that is where the nepotism piece comes in. And I think we do both agree he wouldn't have gotten picked if not for that. But I don't think it's the kind of thing where people can get all up in arms and say, "Oh my God, like this is absolutely terrible." Would he have gotten picked without LeBron? Probably not.
No.
Yeah, exactly. Would he have gotten picked without LeBron? No. Is it a smart move necessarily for the future of your franchise? No. Is it short-sighted? Probably. But is it a complete waste of a pick before you even seen the kid develop or play anything? I think that's kind of unfair. You can say the potential is low. You can point out any of the flaws in his game that you'd like, but I do think he hasn't really gotten the chance to prove himself. The one last thing I will say is just I said this when he declared for the draft, and I'll say it again. I just think this is like stupid for Bronny and his career. I don't know why you wouldn't go back to college, especially when you didn't get that first year. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Probably could make more money in college, to be honest.
Yeah, because based on name recognition alone, being at USC,
I think he already has.
It doesn't make a lot of
sense,
doesn't he? Oh, I'm sure he does.
Yeah. Like I thought I saw an ad that he was going to be in a Nike ad already and all that. Like, yeah, I do agree with you. College would have been the smarter route. Like, even just like who's going to want him, right? Like, if let's say when LeBron retires, is he actually going to have a roster spot, or is he done? Is he retiring at the same time his dad retires, basically?
Yeah.
Like that's the conversation.
He might have to.
He might have to. Yeah. Yeah, you just never know. I mean, I am just very low on him as a prospect. Like he has the explosiveness of a good guard. Like he has the height, he has the speed, he has all those things. He's 6'1". Like, and sure, you can look at examples like Isaiah Thomas, right? Where he's the outlier that everyone likes to bring up. Oh, height isn't everything. Not everyone's Isaiah Thomas. While like Bronny might have he's a very athletic guard. He's not as quick as Isaiah Thomas is. And also Bronny, like I don't know. I can go on about this forever. I understand the whole argument of it doesn't actually matter in the grand scheme of things. I just mean like in the sense of trying to make the argument that it could be worth it because he could have potential. I don't see that at all. I don't see him having potential. I just don't think it's there.
I just think, like, while I agree with you, I don't think you can. I think just with the experience level that he has, which is literally none, I don't think you can say there's no potential there. I think just based on that alone, I think obviously you can look at him as a prospect and say, oh, I don't see much, but to say there's no potential, I feel like it's just writing him off before he's even crossed the starting line.
I don't know. I am writing him off before he crosses the starting line, absolutely. But I'm writing him off for a lot of the same reasons I'd write off any 6'1" second round pick.
Yeah.
Like he's undersized and his style does not lean into the fact that he's undersized. He plays like he's 6'4" or 6'5". Like, and that doesn't help him, right? Like he doesn't have a lot that really leans towards him succeeding, which is why I have such a hard time believing in him. If he made the effort to just be, funnily enough, your JJ Redick, where he is a shooter who can play some defense. He doesn't handle the ball. He's just that type of role player. Sure. If he actually did that, yes, that is the one situation I could see him potentially developing into a role player. I cannot imagine him becoming like a legit starter. Like, he's just not. He doesn't have that. He doesn't have the like multi-skill game, and I don't think he has the time to build that, or really the athleticism. It's not there. He's here for the name, and that it's okay. That's fine. Like, that is just what it is. It's something that happens in the NBA. It happens in everything, but it's yeah, I don't know. I look at him as a prospect and I don't see anything. Like, that's more like you're saying we shouldn't write him off. I am on the other side. I wrote him off the second you walked in the door. Like, you are too short to ride this ride, good sir.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube. Like we said at the start, we're at 96 subscribers. Make sure to bump us up to triple digits. Check us out, Instagram, TikTok, all the good places. If you want to listen to us but not see all the cool stuff going on the screen over here.
Yeah, not see anything because
you don't like
happening.
it. If you like what you're hearing but not what you're seeing, make sure to check us out on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the places you can find the podcast. We're the Trick Play Sports Podcast. Anyways, shoutouts for this week. My shout out, I feel like this is kind of lame. I had like a bunch of options. None of them are like showstoppers or anything. I'm just gonna shout out these new headphones I got. They're pretty sick. I feel like, I don't know why, I like over-ear headphones a lot more than like earbuds.
I do too.
They just feel like they feel nicer, and I just feel like so much more of a podcaster right now, which is pretty cool. I feel like I look the part a lot more than I did from going to from having like using my laptop camera and the mic and my earbuds to this feels like
now I'm using earbuds. Me and you swapped because there was a long time that I lost my overhead like Bluetooth ones, and I was really sad about it. But now I have these. I like them more for doing this, but yeah, for the most part I agree with you. Overhead are way better.
Yeah, they don't like look as like nice as, well, I mean, I think they look nice, but they're not as discreet as earbuds, which can sometimes be a challenge. But the thing that I like about these, I think this is the kicker, and I think this is why they get the shout out, is they are multi-purpose. They weren't that expensive, like $60 on Amazon, which for headphones is not that bad. The sound quality is really good.
What do you know? What brand they're?
And then they're One Audio, I believe, but audio spelt funky, like O-D.
Oh, I haven't heard of that.
Yeah,
I'm a diehard JBL.
A weird brand.
I'm pretty diehard.
Oh yeah,
JBL.
I recently got a JBL speaker.
I
got a JBL speaker for my birthday.
Like these, like my like the overhead ones I used to have were JBLs. These not expensive JBLs. I will emphasize that. I'm a cheap bastard. But like these actually, these I stole from my sister because she got AirPods. I was like, "Are you gonna use those?" She said no. I was like, "Great." Now I don't need to buy new AirPods. Now I don't need to buy new headphones. I think the right one doesn't work either. That's the funny thing. So I just have one left like rip off AirPod. That's what I've been running with for the last little bit.
That's funny.
Yeah. I don't have as good of a shout out.
It works.
As that. My shout out, or I'll let you continue if you
before you, I just want to say one last thing about these headphones, because I do think the kicker is that not only are they Bluetooth as they are doing right now, you can also hook them up wired to both a laptop or anything with a normal headphone jack. But also, if you're getting fancy with it and have like a record player or something, they have the bigger jack that you can plug into like a receiver and also like a keyboard, which I also have. So
that's cool.
Before I was looking at, I'd have to like get all these adapters and shit and all these different pairs of headphones. But now I can literally just buy this all for $60, and no matter what kind of situation I'm going into, I can say, "Oh, you don't have Bluetooth, like the Bluetooth's not working, but you have a headphone jack." Boom. Oh, it's a keyboard. Boom. Other one. Oh, I can only do Bluetooth. Boom. There you go.
You know what's funny?
I wanted to shout that out.
Yeah, I'm happy. I'm gonna keep doing this green screen thing for the outro because it's goofy. But if we ever actually end up having a serious conversation during the outro, like we'll be talking about like a serious and I'm just gonna be like laughing because I'll just like look at my own screen and see my face on the fucking sphere. Like how am I like? It's just the goofiest shit. My shout out for this week. Did I wouldn't have shouted this out before. I don't think. I did a podcast in Mexico. If some people may remember that. So I was in Mexico for about a week. When I was in Mexico, I bought a hat. This is a sad story, by the way. I bought a hat. It was my Mexican cowboy hat for $15.
Oh yeah.
Did I tell this story?
I saw this in Be Real. Yeah. I saw it in your Be Reals. So
yes. It was my Mexican Mexican cowboy hat. And I could probably if I'm not lazy, I'll throw up a photo of it on the screen. And but at the beginning of the week, I bought it for $15, thinking this is my hat while I'm here. I probably won't wear it when I get back home. Whatever, it's $15. It was just that. By the end of the week, I was like, I am wearing this every day for the rest of my life. This is my favorite hat ever. I fell in love with that hat. And then I went on a boat. Now that hat is in the Atlantic, which is the most sad. I was so bummed about it for ages. I found it on Amazon. I like got back home. I found it on Amazon for $50. I want to add that on compared to the $15 price tag. And I was like, you know what?
Did you buy it?
I did buy it. I bought it. And you know what makes it way worse? 1 second. I have it. It came in a flat package. It got bent. Like it is so like I don't know if I can really give it.
No.
Like look at that. So it got fucked up. I've spent the last 24 hours trying to fix it. So yeah, my shout out is fuck you Amazon or fuck whatever like Chinese company made this hat. I was so bummed about it too. Like I'm gonna try and fix it. I don't know how I'm gonna. It's my Stampede hat no matter what, because I'm not buying another one now. I'm stuck with it. But yeah, no, that's my shout out. My shout out is this here. It might be more obvious how bent it is if I put it on. Look at that. Look at that fucking curve.
You can see how even it is. Yeah.
It's not working with the sphere.
Oh my
the
God.
Hat does not the sphere does not like the hat, but there you go. My Mexican cowboy hat. One version of it, the better version of it, I will add, is sitting at the bottom of the Atlantic, which is very depressing. So there you go.
R.I.P. hat.
The green screen looks like it's deteriorating.
This part. Yeah.
It looks like it's getting worse. So make sure to subscribe
the sphere
for more.
Is slowly consuming you. Subscribe before the sphere consumes Simon.
Just slow death. Death by sphere. It probably doesn't help I'm wearing a green shirt. That might be why.
Oh yeah, that would do it. That would
yeah.
do it.
I don't know why it's deteriorating my hair though. Like I'm being like faded away Infinity War style.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you have any ideas, yeah. If you, that's our actual thing. In the intro, we said subscribe or Bronny James will join your favorite basketball team. I will just die. If we do not hit 100 subscribers, the sphere will consume me.
Yeah.
Save my soul. And also, if you made it this far in the episode, have you ever seen that stuff on YouTube? If you made it this far in the episode, say what you want me to teleport into at the end of next episode. We can make that a thing.
I don't think any human being has seen this part of the Trick Play podcast.
That is not true.
I don't really.
As someone who looks at our analytics, that is not true. But
people have
it is significantly. I will add, it is significantly lower than the number of people who just watch the first 5 minutes. But there are people who do.
Checks out. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, so that kind of is concerning because I thought the last 5 minutes were where I could just say whatever I want and have no consequences. So that's a little concerning.
Oh, don't worry, buddy. It ain't a high number, but it's a number.
I don't even know what I've said. If I get canceled, you know why. I'm sure I've said something.
I don't. Most of the outros are just bullshit, so I don't even think there's anything that crazy in them.
Yeah, no, but most of the time, like now is okay because we're doing it earlier in the day. But most of the time, it's like
That's true. Yeah, by
11:30
the end,
p.m. and I'm just kind
we're
of
both
like
like brain dead
high.
apes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that might not help our case here.
Yeah, that's true. Anyway, make sure to leave a comment. Leave if for some reason you watch this far, for some reason, some unholy reason, leave a comment saying where you want me to be next. I was on the Sphere this week, but I don't know. We can come up with something. Make sure to subscribe to all that stuff. Follow us on Spotify. I think you can follow people. Can you? I don't fucking know. Follow us on Spotify and on Apple and all those fun places. So there you go. Oh yes.
And
And
before you leave, remember, Penix better have a warm ass. See you next week.